Hello everyone, sir, classmates, good afternoon. My topic is all about test specifications, criterion, reference assessment. Test specifications is a test specifications that generative blueprint from which many equivalent test items or tasks can be produced. Perhaps the earliest mention of test specifications dates to Rach 1924 to 95 up to 99. 1929 verse 150. Well prior to Glacier's paper that coined the term criterion reference. Test developers realized that standardized testing needed to control test tasks, so that new and equivalent versions of tests could be developed, trialed, and normed. Early conceptions of test specifications reflected then prevalent normative views of test developers. Development, and the goal of this early specification was to generate tasks of varying difficulty levels. This specification also provided information about the particular skills in a test. How many test items are needed for each skill? Often this information was set forth in tabular form. A table of specifications, for example, the table may tell the test developer that 10 multiple-choice comprehension questions are needed for a test of reading, 5 texts, 2 peer text, 1 each to test a main idea and to test a specific textual inference. A table of specifications is a very valuable tool, and it is still widely used in many test development settings. However, it has a drawback. It does not provide adequate data to generate test specifications, test questions that say much about mastery. It is not a tool of operationalizing an ability. What is main idea? What is textual inference? Criterion reference test specifications originated in the 1970s and provide that level of detail. Popham 1978, Davidson and Lynch 2002. Under the Division 2007, chapters A4 and C4, modern test score reports obtain their richness in part from their bank of detailed test specifications, and if the test still serves a normative function, in many do, then it is no longer accurate to say that detailed test specifications, and if this test still serves a normative function, it is no longer accurate to say that detailed test specifications are no sole province of criterion referencing. They have become part of all good testing practice. Detailed test specifications can come in many formats and design. All formats share two common elements: sample test, task, and guiding language. About how to produce such samples, Fulcher and Davidson 2007, Chapter A4. The following is an example of a detailed test specification. Davidson 2007, Chapter A4 and C4. We will continue this topic. For example, a sample test of specification. Example of a detailed test specification level 2 in the Association of Language Testers and Europe, or ALTE, framework, social and travel context. Guiding language. At this level of the ALTE framework, speakers are expected to handle the following types of language. At this level of ALTE framework and the social and travel context, threshold users can understand most of the language on an ordinary menu. Routine, letters and forms, adverts and brochures related to hotels or other forms of accommodation. They can understand most levels on everyday medical and food products and follow simple instructions for use of medicines and cooking instructions found on food packaging. For use of medicines and cooking instructions, food and packaging, so it is a general point or main idea. They can distinguish between personal and promotional mail from institutions such as banks and get the general meaning of simple articles and newspapers or leaflets produced by post offices and banks. This test specification produces a multiple choice item aligned with the above descriptor. The system of the item is rendered in the text taker's first language. It stipulates background knowledge to the setting of the item and refers to real-world language sources as quoted in the ELTE2 descriptor above. So when we talk about this is a sample of test specifications. So when we heard about a sample of test specifications, so when we talk about specifications, we are going to specify the topics or the important topics, just like this example, an ordinary menu, the letters and forms and brochures and the forms of accommodation. So it needs an assessment or guide that is called table of specifications in order to relocate or in order to understand, to comprehend what our task to do, especially for teaching strategy as a future teacher. So we need to give the students the important feedback and the important lessons that we have to deal in order to learn the students as well, in order to motivate them in order to give them acquired knowledge. This table of specifications, it is served as a guide or protocols to become the students smart and know the lessons, the topic that being discussed by the teachers and the classroom assessment. Okay, clearly, this specification needs to improve. For example, the test developer should state the intended correct response, which is B. The guiding language implies that this sample task fits the quoted ELTE2 descriptor because it is a hotel advertisement. However, the task is actually rather simple. Table of specifications also, it is also need for the business. How we're going to manage the business. How we are going to make a policy or to give the important informations of the employee. If, for example, I am the manager of the restaurant, so I know what the protocols of the restaurant that I'm going to manage. And I know how to, because I am a manager, I know how to manage the restaurant. What would be the very effective products that I'm going to make an inventory, each of them, the items that I'm going to give to the customers' needs when the customers buy my foods. So if I were a manager, so I'm going to give the business or the food is enough for the needs of the customers, so that the customers will satisfied my menu or satisfied the food that I'm going to give, or that I'm going to as what the customers need, or as what the customers order after buying the customers, after the cost that I'm going to receive. So I will give the food and make it sure that the food is very good test for the customers. As more test items are created from these specifications, its developers may fine-tune their intent and come to a consensus, and as those versions are written, the positioning of the specifications against the ELTE2 descriptor would improve. So it needs to improve. If I'm going to make, if I am a narrator or descriptor on its structure, because I am a manager, for example, of the company, of the restaurant or the Jollibee, so I'm going to make a descriptive policy instruction for some of my employees, so that my employees low position, they can manage it, they can learn, they can practice as well, so that they can master the job, the opportunity. Okay. And it should have healthy criticism. Yes, the food that I'm going to deliver, or the business that I have managed, to make it sure the products is very safety for the needs of the customers. It should be a valuable or value and careful discussions of specifications, and it is possible very costly to try out this before they are used. Okay. There are also some problematic considerations of when it comes to a language theory or at play in this test. The previous paragraph is unique critical of these detailed test specifications. When you talk about critical, so we should think it very criticize. We should always smart or wise. And as I said, if I were a manager, so I should always make a very specific and smart ways or protocols, instructions of the company, so that the customers, I can give them their needs, the products, after the cost buy of the food. There are numbers of active research topics and specification-driven language test development. So the first is the relationship of test specifications to validity. When we talk about the number of active research language of development, so we should know the learners, or as a future teacher, for example, we should know our learners, the number of how many learners, or for example, and 100%, not all learners can learn. Out of 100, there are 75% can learn our lessons. There are remaining who has not listening, who will not understand, because students has a different intelligences inside the classroom. There are a number of active research topics and specification-driven language test development. The first is the relationship of test specifications to validity. Over time, test specifications grow and evolved and improved. A feedback from the team members is incorporated, and as a tryout data is consulted. This growth is one source of evidence for a validity argument. So it should be valid. It should have an importance. It should have a significance of the study. We should master it so that it could be validated, or the argument that is present conceptual based from Chappell this volume. the diagram of the relationships of evolutionary test specifications to validation, shown in figure 13.2. Okay. Additional for my report. Hello sir, classmates. Additional for my report for today. Test is table of specifications or test of specifications. It is a very important guide in order to let that learners know what the difficulties teaching of the teacher inside the classroom in order to motivate our learners, to refresh their mind, to guide the topic that being discussed. And as I said, as a manager, if I were a manager of the company, so I'm going to manage the company as well in a good way. So I make a protocol or guidelines that being followed by the owner of the company. So I'm going to follow the rules and regulations according to the owner of the company if I were a manager, so that my employee, my co-workers, or the some employees that lower of my position, so I'm going to teach and guide them so that my co-workers also learn some important techniques and strategies to improve the company or business that I'm going to manage it. Just like some important factors, just like we're going to make a safety food so that the customers satisfied the products of the restaurant or Jollibee. And that would be all. Thank you for listening, sir. Good afternoon. And classmates, once again, see you again. Thank you for listening, everyone.